everyone, and welcome to our deep dive all about imposter phenomenon.
Imposter phenomenon.
Have you ever felt like a fraud, even when you've accomplished amazing things?
Yeah.
You're not alone.
You're definitely not alone.
Research suggests that a huge 82% of people
Wow, 82%.
experience this at some point.
That's a lot.
It's so common, yet so many people suffer in silence.
That's right.
So today we're diving deep into a Monitor on Psychology article called How to Overcome Imposter Phenomenon.
I like it.
Our mission today is to understand imposter phenomenon, its effects, and most importantly, how we can overcome it.
I'm in.
All right, so let's start with the basics.
Sounds good.
What exactly is imposter phenomenon?
So imposter phenomenon is that nagging feeling that you haven't really earned your success, that you're a fraud just waiting to be exposed.
Right.
And it's even though you have evidence to the contrary.
Oh, yeah.
Like you have all the degrees and the awards and everything.
Oh, you've done the work.
You've done the work, but you still feel like a phony.
Still feel like you don't belong.
Exactly.
Interesting.
You know, the term was actually coined back in the 70s by psychologists Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes.
Hi, Imes.
They noticed this pattern in their high-achieving female clients.
So they didn't call it imposter phenomenon right away?
No, they initially used the term imposter syndrome.
Ah.
But over time, phenomenon or experience became preferred. Because it emphasizes that it's not a clinical diagnosis, but rather a very common experience.
So it's not just those pre-presentation jitters.
No.
Like everyone gets.
Exactly.
Like,
it's a much deeper feeling of not being good enough, despite all the evidence that it says you are.
Right.
So yeah, it's a lot more than just those pre-presentation jitters.
I'm curious, though, does this affect everyone equally, or are there certain groups that are more susceptible to it?
That's a really good question. And you know, it's definitely something that affects high achievers across the board.
Yeah.
But research shows it's especially prominent among people with underrepresented identities. Like people of color or those who are transgender and non-binary.
That makes sense. There's actually a quote in the article from Kevin Coakley, a professor who studies imposter phenomenon. And he talks about how Black, Asian, and Latino college students often feel extra pressure to prove themselves in predominantly white spaces.
Totally.
I can see how that could really fuel those imposter feelings.
Absolutely. And Audrey Irvin, who's a clinical psychologist who works with gender-expansive clients, you know, they talk about the unique challenges faced by trans and non-binary individuals.
Right.
They often feel this pressure to conform to societal expectations of gender, which can just lead to this intense feeling of being an imposter.
That makes total sense. So we know that imposter phenomenon can be pretty pervasive, but is it always a bad thing?
That's a really interesting question, and it's actually pretty nuanced. You know, a little self-doubt can be a good thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it can motivate us to learn and adapt and grow.
Like keeps you on your toes.
Keeps you on your toes, keeps you learning.
Yeah.
Some experts even suggest that it can drive us to achieve even more.
So it's like imposter feelings can be a double-edged sword.
Exactly. On one hand, that healthy dose of self-doubt can help us improve and achieve. But when those feelings become too intense, they can definitely have a negative impact.
Right, because if you're constantly second-guessing yourself, it's got to take a toll.
It absolutely does. Research has actually shown a link between intense imposter feelings and increased anxiety and depression.
Wow.
Particularly in underrepresented groups.
That makes sense.
And, you know, often people experiencing imposter phenomenon feel isolated.
Yeah.
Like they're the only ones struggling, which of course isn't true at all.
Right.
But that feeling of isolation can really make things worse.
It's like a vicious cycle. Feeling inadequate leads to isolation, which further feeds those feelings.
It's a vicious cycle for sure.
You mentioned the impact on mental health. Can imposter phenomenon affect other areas of life too?
Absolutely. It can impact our performance at work or in school. It can affect our relationships.
Makes sense.
It can even hold us back from taking risks and going after the things we really want.
The article gives an example of a Black woman going into a job interview. And all she sees are portraits of white male leaders on the wall.
Yeah, I remember that example.
That type of subtle environmental cue can really make someone feel like they don't belong.
Absolutely.
Which in turn could affect their performance.
Right. Their confidence takes a hit.
And that ties into what another expert in the article, Lincoln Hill, said about the impact of microaggressions in the workplace.
Yes.
Even those subtle biases can chip away at someone's confidence.
Yeah. It's death by 1,000 cuts.
Exactly. And it's not just about performance in the workplace or in school.
Right.
These feelings can affect relationships, too.
Absolutely.
I would imagine. So if you're constantly worried about being found out, it would make it difficult to be vulnerable and authentic with people.
You hit the nail on the head. It can also prevent people from taking risks, like applying for a promotion or going after a new career path.
Right, because that fear of failure is so strong.
So strong. It's paralyzing for some people.
And if you already feel like you don't belong or that you're not qualified negotiating for a better salary or even leaving a job that's no longer a good fit becomes so much harder.
It does.
It's like those imposter feelings can creep into every corner of your life.
They really can.
And over time contribute to burnout.
For sure, if you're always pushing yourself, never feeling good enough, and never really celebrating your successes.
Yeah.
It's a recipe for exhaustion.
The article mentioned that people with imposter feelings often feel relieved rather than proud.
It's true.
After an accomplishment.
Yeah.
I can see how that lack of satisfaction could lead to overworking and neglecting self-care.
Absolutely. It's a slippery slope.
So we've talked about the negative side, but what about solutions?
Okay.
Is there hope for overcoming these feelings?
Absolutely. There is. The good news is that there are strategies to help manage and overcome imposter phenomenon.
Okay.
And they work on both a systemic level and an individual level.
That makes sense. Let's start with systemic changes, because as one of the experts, Andrea Salazar-Nunez, pointed out, the systems we operate in often play a huge role in perpetuating these feelings.
Yes.
It's not just about individual resilience, it's also about creating environments that are truly equitable and inclusive.
Couldn't agree more.
Another psychologist, Lisa Orbe-Austin, brings up how the hyper-competitive culture that exists in many academic programs and workplaces can actually breed imposter phenomenon.
Absolutely.
She even mentioned a study where a staggering 88% of postdoctoral psychology students reported experiencing at least moderate imposter feelings.
88%, that's a huge number.
With that kind of pressure, it's hardly surprising that people feel like imposters.
You're telling me.
And for individuals from underrepresented backgrounds who already face additional barriers and biases, those feelings can be even more intense.
Absolutely.
So what can institutions do to create a culture where everyone feels seen, valued, and supported?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
Well, Lincoln Hill had some good suggestions.
Okay.
Institutions need to prioritize hiring and promoting more diverse individuals. Providing training on topics like race and gender and creating affinity spaces for support are also crucial.
Those sound like good starting points.
And finally, holding people accountable for those subtle biases, those microaggressions, can make a huge difference.
Creating a space where everyone feels like they belong.
Exactly.
But what about individual strategies? How can we start tackling those imposter feelings on a personal level?
Well, the article outlines 7 key strategies that have been shown to make a real difference.
Perfect. I think that's a great place to pause and pick up in part 2.
Sounds good.
We'll dive into those strategies and see how we can start applying them in our own lives.
I can't wait.
Stay with us. Welcome back to our deep dive into imposter phenomenon. Before the break, we were just getting to the good stuff, the strategies. So let's jump right into these 7 ways to combat imposter feelings.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, strategy number 1.
Number 1
is all about learning the facts.
Learning the facts.
It might seem straightforward, but it's really about challenging those negative thoughts that fuel those imposter feelings.
Right.
Okay, so how do we actually do that?
So one expert in the article, Jessica Van der Laan, she suggests taking a step back and really assessing the situation objectively. Instead of getting caught up in the I'm not good enough spiral. Ask yourself, what evidence actually supports that thought? And just as importantly, what evidence contradicts it?
So it's about taking a more balanced and realistic view of our abilities?
Exactly. And remember, becoming a psychologist, or any other professional for that matter, is a huge accomplishment.
It is.
It takes years of dedication and hard work. So acknowledging that journey is important. Van der Laan also recommends comparing yourself to where you were a year ago or even 5 years ago. You'll probably be surprised by how much you've learned and how much you've grown.
That's a good point. It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and lose sight of the bigger picture.
Yeah, we get tunnel vision.
But learning the facts isn't just about external evidence, is it?
No, it's also about paying attention to that inner voice, to your self-talk. Think about it. How would you talk to a friend who was downplaying their achievements? Would you let them get away with that negative self-talk?
Probably not.
Probably not. So why do we do that to ourselves? It's about applying that same kindness and support to our own inner dialogue.
So it's about catching ourselves when we start thinking things like, was nothing anyone could have done it.
Yeah.
And replacing that with something more positive and realistic, like, you know what, I worked hard for this and I'm proud of what I accomplished.
Exactly. It's about shifting that internal dialogue to something more supportive and balanced. And that leads us to strategy number 2.
Okay.
Share your feelings.
Share your feelings.
Now, this one might seem a little counterintuitive, especially if you're already feeling like a fraud.
Right. Why would you want to share those feelings with anyone?
It's not about broadcasting your insecurities to the world.
Okay.
It's about strategically choosing trusted individuals outside of your professional circle.
Oh.
People who can offer an objective perspective and remind you of your strengths.
Because sometimes we need that outside validation to help us see what we might be missing.
Exactly.
Right.
And for people from underrepresented groups, finding those empowering communities where you feel seen and understood is really crucial.
Yeah.
Having those spaces where you can connect with others who've walked a similar path can be incredibly validating and supportive.
It's like finding your tribe, those people who just get it.
Absolutely.
It can make a world of difference.
A world of difference for sure. And if those feelings become overwhelming, therapy can provide a safe and supportive space to explore those deeply ingrained beliefs.
Okay.
And develop healthier coping mechanisms.
That makes sense.
So therapy is always an option too.
Okay. I'm liking these strategies so far.
Good.
So what's number 3?
Number 3 is celebrate your successes.
Celebrate your successes.
It sounds simple, but it's something we often forget to do, especially when we're struggling with imposter feelings.
I'm definitely guilty of that. It's so easy to brush off accomplishments or downplay our role in them.
It is. And the experts in this article really emphasize the importance of acknowledging and celebrating our wins.
Okay.
No matter how big or small.
I like that.
Take that moment to savor the accomplishment, to really let it sink in and give yourself credit for all the effort you put in.
It's like giving ourselves permission to feel good about what we've achieved.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to share those successes with supportive friends and family. Let them celebrate with you.
Yeah.
Another tip is to create tangible reminders of your achievements.
So like saving that email from a client who gave you positive feedback?
Yeah.
Or framing a certificate you earned?
Exactly. It's about having those visual cues to remind us of our capabilities when those imposter voices start creeping in.
Even those seemingly small things, like a positive note from a colleague or successfully delivering a presentation, can be incredibly powerful affirmations of our competence.
Absolutely, they can.
Okay, strategy number 4 is a big one, and it might be a bit challenging, especially for high achievers.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let go of perfectionism.
Perfectionism, that's a tough one.
So much of this imposter phenomenon seems tied to this relentless pursuit of perfection.
It really does.
And Vanderland points out that striving for perfection is often a recipe for disappointment and self-criticism.
Makes sense.
She suggests shifting the focus from achieving perfection to recognizing progress, instead of beating yourself up for not getting it perfect.
Right.
Acknowledge all the steps you've taken and the effort you put in.
Focus on the progress, not the perfection.
And reframe failures as learning opportunities.
Oh, I like that.
Instead of seeing setbacks as proof of your inadequacy, view them as valuable feedback that can help you learn and grow.
Yeah, turn those failures into fuel.
It's about adopting a growth mindset where challenges are viewed as opportunities rather than threats to our self-worth.
I love that.
And sometimes it's about letting go of those rigid roles and expectations we place on ourselves.
Right. We can be so hard on ourselves.
That reminds me of something Lisa Orbe-Austin mentioned in the article about people getting stuck in the helper role.
Yes, if you're always trying to be the rescuer, the one with all the answers, it becomes difficult to accept that it's okay to not be perfect, that it's okay to ask for help.
So true.
And that brings us perfectly to strategy number 5.
Okay, what is it?
Cultivate self-compassion.
Cultivate self-compassion. Now, that's something I think we could all use a little more of.
I agree.
What does self-compassion look like in the context of imposter phenomenon?
It's about treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer a friend who was struggling. It's about recognizing your inherent worth as a human being, regardless of your accomplishments or perceived shortcomings.
So it's about shifting from an external measure of self-worth to an internal one.
Exactly. It's about observing those imposter feelings with curiosity and compassion rather than judgment and self-criticism.
Right.
But I think it's important to acknowledge that for people from marginalized groups who've often faced systemic barriers and biases, cultivating self-compassion can be particularly challenging.
That makes sense. They may have internalized messages that tell them they're not good enough, messages that are reinforced by societal structures.
Absolutely.
And it's not about ignoring the realities of oppression. It's about recognizing that your worth isn't determined by external systems or societal expectations.
Well said.
It's a powerful reminder that we are not solely responsible for the messages we've internalized.
Right.
And that self-compassion requires acknowledging the larger context in which we operate.
I couldn't agree more.
This is all great advice. Okay, what's next on our list of strategies?
Number 6 is an interesting one. Share your failures.
Share your failures. I thought we were supposed to be celebrating our successes.
I know, right?
Why would we want to share our failures?
It's not about dwelling on negativity. It's about gaining a more realistic perspective.
Okay.
Richard Gardner, a professor who has done research on imposter phenomenon.
Gardner.
He suggests that discussing failures with our peers can help us realize that those experiences are actually normal.
Okay.
It breaks down the illusion that everyone else is succeeding effortlessly.
So much of those imposter feelings come from comparing ourselves to others.
Exactly.
But if we're more open about our struggles, it can help dismantle those comparisons that fuel those feelings.
It can. And he even gives this example of a Facebook group where junior professors share their failures.
Okay.
Like getting their papers rejected or experiencing setbacks in their careers.
Interesting.
It's like they're creating this culture where vulnerability is valued and people feel comfortable sharing their struggles without fear of judgment.
And by sharing those experiences, they're normalizing the ups and downs that are just part of any career path.
Exactly. It's so important because often all we see are the highlight reels of other people's lives.
Right.
Which can make us feel like you're the only one struggling.
We're bombarded with these curated versions of reality.
They are.
And it's easy to forget that everyone faces challenges.
It happens to the best of us.
All right, we're on to our final strategy.
Okay, hit me with it.
Accept it.
Accept it.
This might sound a little defeatist at first.
Okay.
But it's really about recognizing that overcoming imposter phenomenon is a journey, not a destination.
I like that.
Jessica Vanderlyn mentioned that those feelings might pop up again.
Yeah, they probably will.
Especially during career transitions or any time we step outside of our comfort zone.
It's true. Those are prime times for imposter feelings to resurface.
So it's about accepting that those imposter voices might reappear, but now we have the tools and self-awareness to manage them.
Exactly. We're better equipped to deal with them now.
And those transitions often involve changes in our social reference points,
right?
Which can trigger those comparisons that fuel imposter feelings.
Absolutely. We're suddenly surrounded by new people, new expectations.
So, for example, if you were at the top of your class in high school and now you're surrounded by equally brilliant classmates in college,
yeah,
it's natural to question your abilities even if you're still excelling.
Right, that makes total sense.
It's about recognizing those feelings as normal and remembering that they don't diminish your accomplishments or your worth.
They don't define us.
It's a great reminder that we're all human and these feelings are just part of the experience.
They are.
But that doesn't mean they have to control us.
We have the power to choose how we respond to them.
These strategies have been so insightful and practical.
I'm glad you think so.
But before we wrap up, let's do a quick recap in part 3. We've covered a lot of ground, and I want to make sure these takeaways really sink in. Stay with us. Welcome back to our deep dive on imposter phenomenon. We've learned so much about what it is, who it affects, and how it can impact our lives.
Yeah, and how common it is.
Right, and importantly, we've explored some really cool strategies to help us overcome those imposter feelings.
Those 7 strategies were really powerful.
They were. It's important to remember that imposter phenomenon is incredibly common. You are not alone in experiencing these feelings.
Definitely not.
You know, it's almost like this secret society that nobody wants to admit they belong to.
Right.
But then we hear that up to 82% of people struggle with this.
Yeah, 82%.
And it really puts things into perspective.
It does.
It's not a sign of weakness or failure.
Nope.
It's a human experience.
Absolutely.
While it can have a negative impact on our well-being, relationships, and careers, it can also be a catalyst for growth.
That's right.
We talked about how a bit of self-doubt can be healthy. It can push us to learn and adapt and reach for our goals.
Keeps us motivated.
But when those feelings become too intense, that's when those strategies we discussed come in.
Exactly.
Challenging those negative thoughts, celebrating our successes, cultivating self-compassion, seeking support from trusted individuals and communities.
Right.
Those are all key.
They are.
And we can't forget about systemic change.
That's huge.
Creating more equitable and inclusive environments is crucial in dismantling those barriers that contribute to imposter feelings, especially for those from underrepresented groups.
Absolutely.
It's a shared responsibility. We each have a role to play.
You do.
In creating a culture where everyone feels seen, valued, and supported.
I love that.
As we wrap up this deep dive into imposter phenomenon, we want to leave you with a thought-provoking question.
All right, I'm ready.
What small step can you take today to challenge your own imposter feelings and celebrate your accomplishments?
What a great question.
Maybe it's sharing a recent win with a friend, or reflecting on how far you've come.
Yeah.
Or perhaps just taking a moment to acknowledge your efforts and feel gratitude for all that you've achieved.
Love it.
Remember, progress over perfection.
Yes.
Every step you take, no matter how small, is a step towards owning your success.
That's right.
And living a more authentic and fulfilling life.
I agree.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into imposter phenomenon.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you walk away feeling empowered and ready to tackle those imposter feelings head on.
You've got this.
Until next time.